This is the 2022 Bedrock Nervo Heritage Red Blend coming from the Alexander Valley in Sonoma. This is a wine that I have long been a fan of, and I'll tell you a little story before I get into the tasting notes. On our very first season of Wine Access Unfiltered, we had renowned critic Antonio Galoni of Venice on, and normally we had selected the wines that we were drinking for our guests ourselves, but in this case, given his career, we thought we would let him decide. And of all the wines that he could have picked, he chose Bedrock to drink with us, which I thought was so telling, right? We could have had anything really, but he wanted to drink this wine, and we learned a little bit more about this producer. I had always been a fan of Morgan Twain Peterson and Chris Morgan, who are making this wine, and it's so representative of California and not only what we're doing today, but what we used to be doing back in the 1800s, which is when this vineyard dates back to. This is a blend, if you can believe it, of 18 different grape varietals. The base, of course, being Zinfandel, but also in there you've got some Negrette, Alicante Bouschet, Grenache. If you wanted to taste what people were making back in the 1800s in California, this would probably be the closest representation to what they were doing. Back then, they were planting broadly, they were co-fermenting, and they were doing it with own rooted vines, which means they weren't planting on rootstock. On the nose, you're immediately going to notice an incredible amount of fruit jumping out of the glass, right? That Zinfandel is giving you all of that purpley, brambly, just absolutely California sun-kissed fruit. But what I love that they do so well here is they still keep it in check, right? We're not letting the Zinfandel go absolutely wild. We're not letting it get to a point that feels a little too ostentatious, a little too alcoholic. This is reserved. So as much as this is a big, broad, juicy wine, there's still so much finesse. Now, just like any good blend, this is going to ebb and flow between lots of different things. And with 18 varieties going on, you'd be hard pressed to throw a dart at a board and get an answer wrong here. There is so much happening, everything from herbal notes to juicy notes. Zinfandel is, of course, going to give you all of the classic things that we expect, right? Everything from blueberries to plums. I even get a little bit of peach yogurt. That's sort of my weird tell, but it doesn't have to be yours. And then we have the Grenache adding a little bit of that kirschy strawberry thing. And then you have this lift and this brightness that's really coming from the restraint that they're using during winemaking. What's interesting is that this cuvee is not normally this approachable early on. It's a cuvee that really takes time. But because it was a slightly warmer vintage, what we're finding is that this wine is more approachable, especially in its youth. Now, don't let that fool you into thinking that this is a wine that can't age, because believe it or not, it actually can. So if you felt like buying a few bottles and laying a few down, you could absolutely do that. I think what you're going to find is it's really going to start leaning into more of those herbal things. So if you want some of that baby fat to kind of fall off, some of those like more primary fruits, what you're going to love is that this is going to soften texturally, but it's also going to give you a lot more depth and complexity as it ages. Now, if your patience for waiting on wines isn't there, which I totally understand, feel free to crack this open, grab some pizza or grab some barbecue. This is a wine that definitely wants a great barbecue. So whether you are doing ribs, chicken, this is a wine that calls for barbecue flavors, grilled flavors, something that feels very outdoorsy, very easy. But this is a wine that I'm also serving all the way through Thanksgiving. I think this is a wine, because it has so many different varietals and because it still has such great acidity, you can pair this with lots of different foods, leaning into those later November months when we're getting into our squashes, our root vegetables, and things like that. Definitely have a little fun with this one, because this is a wine that is so representative of California, and I'm so excited that we were able to get an allocation of this.